Okay, somebody needs to give me a comment. Let me know if I've got the audio turned on now, which I had the audio turned on. And for some reason, it's blocked. And I just went and checked all the settings. All the settings looked to be fine. All I did was boot and start over. And hopefully, we've got you for a special Monday edition of the Sports Rush, broadcasting live today. And I get a much better. Thank you very much, Ryan. So I'm glad we can actually do our audio today. Hey, we've got a huge show because Greg Rakestraw is going to be joining us for the first time here on the podcast. Can't wait for that. That comes up in about 5 minutes. Also on the way, Eric Dutkiewicz is going to be joining us and talking about high school football. We got 2 weeks in the books. We're heading into conference play this Friday. And a couple of surprise 0-2 teams in the SAC. So they've had difficult schedules, but there are two names in the conference that have traditionally been among the conference best. And they're both 0-2, and we're going to broadcast them. We're going to find out who gets that first win because we'll have that game coming up this Friday. We'll talk to you about that. We'll also talk to you about the Purdue Boilermakers. What a win for the Boilermakers. They get the win. Boiler up. They get the win over Ball State to open up the season 31-0. The Barry Odom era has begun, and it's a positive start at Purdue. Will it continue? We'll talk to Eric Dutkiewicz about what he thought about the Boilermakers. And here's the nice thing. We had the little technical difficulty getting started today, and I apologize for that. But the nice thing is that we've got IU, Purdue, everything that happened like Friday, Saturday. We've got it on the podcast from yesterday. Sorry, I'm trying to read comments and read at the same and talk at the same time because I think I know there's another setting that I can adjust that will help slightly, and see if this makes it a little bit better. I'm trying to make the adjustment microphone while we go. But anyway, do appreciate you being here. And what I really appreciate more than anything, you would just give a click on that subscribe button because it is so important that we build our subscribers, we build our likes, you can comment, and also click the bell so you know when we go live and we're not just sitting here wasting our time because we use some top quality content. That's the other thing I thought about YouTube. It has no real gauge to know what the resume of the person putting out the content is all about. And we've been doing this for 9.5 years. So if you've enjoyed the show, you've listened to it on radio, or you come across it on YouTube, you're enjoying the content, let you know this is a show that is worth them pushing out, and give us that subscribe. That's all it is. Because ultimately, we're not going to send you email. You're not going to be sent a bill. It's totally. So it's really just a nice gesture to say, I'll subscribe. I want to hear more of what he's got to say. I want to follow my favorite teams here in Indiana. That's what we do here. That is all about what we do. And so we would really appreciate it. Be sure to click subscribe. All right. So Fever last night lost. They've split the games on the road trip. So the Fever, after a very good win over LA Sparks out in LA, went up to Golden State, got beat rather soundly last night, but they fought like heck. And that undermanned lineup has been so impressive. How hard they've had to fight. So many names that are not in the lineup right now, and yet they're still fighting their way into playoffs. They're in a pretty good spot right now to make playoffs, despite the loss last night. But they got another big one coming up. So we'll see what happens with her. I want to talk IU and Purdue. We will do that later, but right now we've got to welcome in our first guest, patiently standing by, and know him from High School Champions Network with IHSAA. Know him 11 if you followed any soccer, and I could go on all day, but then we run out of time to actually talk to him. So let's go ahead and bring in Greg Rakestraw, who joins us for the first time. Hey, buddy, thank you so much for coming on.
Good to see you again, bud.
Always good to see you. And let's I want to start real quick, and get a couple of check marks off my list of things to talk to you about, and we'll start with high school football. Uh, Carmel, team rather closely, I think has been kind of to me, the surprise team in the state. They've been rather dominant and put on one heck of an impressive performance Friday.
Correct. That was the game that I had was Carmel and Westfield. And in one sense, you shouldn't be surprised that a Carmel team is good with Kevin Wright as the head coach. In another sense, they were a 3-7 football team last year, and they were a 5-5 team the year before. And last year, the senior class of 2025 was the first class in Carmel High School's history of the modern football state tournament from 1973 on, where a class graduated without winning a sectional championship. So it kind of gave you an idea as to kind of where the program was. But immediately they beat Fishers 49-24. Fishers then turns around and beats Lawrence North in a close game at LN on Friday night. You know, Westfield has got a lot of their defense back. They are young offensively, and they're missing a couple of pieces. That doesn't take away anything from what Carmel is doing. And just kind of the way the schedule shapes out for Carmel, you know, they've got a team from the Dayton area coming to town in Centerville, Ohio this Friday. They go down to Louisville Trinity the following Friday. After that, it's Columbus North and then 4 of the 6 teams in the MIC. And I think the MIC is good. I'm not sure the MIC is great this year. Carmel does not play Lawrence North. They do not play Pike. In other words, what I'm telling you is we're 2 weeks into the season, and I'm not sure who left on their schedule is going to beat them, at least from the state of Indiana. You know, Trinity is a bit of a different story. Carmel and Trinity have kind of traded wins, you know, over the course of the years. So Carmel is good. Carmel has a Division I quarterback in Anthony Colner, who's going to play at Troy. They've got a move-in from Florida named Dane Bathurst that had 3 sacks in the game on Friday night. Carmel is back to being one of the contenders now, at least in the northern half of the state.
Well, if you're going to have that chance to recruit, might as well go down to Florida and get them.
You know, sometimes kids show up on your door. It's amazing how that works, Brent.
All right. So I had a chance to see one of your teams. I saw Center Grove take on Carroll. It's kind of interested to see what it looked like with the Indiana-Fort Wayne matchup. And I'll tell you, Rake, I see it quite often. It's about third year now that I've seen matchups where it just looks like it takes a quarter or two. Fort Wayne School goes up with some confidence that they can actually get on the field and play against that. You know, Carroll was on their heels last year when I saw them play Hamilton Southeast. Carroll was on their heels that first 2 drives of the game against Center Grove when Center Grove went right down the field and punched in touchdowns. It was a game of thunder and lightning. Center Grove rumbled along with their 7-8-yard runs, and Carroll had Jaden Van Pelt. I don't know if you know this young man, but third year as a receiver at Carroll. Man, he was electric. 3 long touchdown plays, and most of it he had to make the play on his own. And he was terrific. But by the time it was over, you felt like, you know, if they just come ready to play and are not intimidated, teams here can match up. Where do you put Center Grove in a power ranking? I know they're number 2 in the state, but I'm not buying that. I think early season polls are very misleading. But where do you think Center Grove really is among what you've seen and what you've witnessed so far?
2 or 3, to be honest
Really?
with you. I think Brownsburg is number 1. I think, and you know, they beat Cathedral 29-0, and Brownsburg returned most of their skill position kids from last year, and obviously being the state champs. I'm kind of putting Carmel 3 right now and Center Grove 2. And I do think Center Grove, because they've got a sophomore quarterback, they are a team that's going to improve as the season goes along. And again, by way of geography, you know that Center Grove is going to be to the regional round, if not the semi-state round, because they have already played the team that they would likely play in the regional round, that being Warren Central, beat them 24-10. And it was a game that I think both teams, rightfully so, I think every team is like this, but especially those 2 locally, feel like they're going to be better products by the time we get to October and November than they are in August, just because there's kind of question marks on both sides of the ball. For example, Warren Central, who beat Warsaw, 28-14 on Friday night. They've got two of the best defensive recruits in the state in terms of Jeremy Finch Jr. and Caleb Elkins. They don't return much else on defense other than that. And there's still kind of the quarterback question that Warren Central has seemingly dealt with, for the last several years. I think Center Grove is this a vintage Center Grove team? I'm not sure. But I do think that Center Grove is likely going to be in the final four teams playing, and I would rank them as the second or third best team in the state right now.
Because it's kind of gauging it against, this is your non-conference. This is what the SAC is for. See where they measure up. And I guess my question is, I know how they measure up against that specific. I don't know yet how good that team is against the rest of the region down there in central Indiana. I thought they were good. I didn't look at them as one of the dominant scene in our state. I think I'm with you. Brownsburg seems to be a little bit above everybody else. I think there's probably 4 or 5 teams in that cluster probably argue as the second best team in Indiana right now. And don't forget Crown Point.
And Crown Point, to their credit, got Pike to play them this year. So again, we have talked about Crown Point in terms of, all right, this is where you have the debate discussion of, are you building a schedule to make sure you're playing as deep into the tournament as you can, or do you understand the economics of it, and where Crown Point, would play Penn, who was clearly the dominant program of outside of Indianapolis North until Crown Point the last couple of years, or do you play two local teams to make sure you got a good gate? And I understand that football drives the bus economically for every other sport. So I get it. I would joke this is like a graduate level athletic administration class in terms of how you handle those two non-conference games. Is Pike one of the best teams in the area? No, but Pike is probably better than anybody else that Crown Point is going to play in the Duneland now for the next 7 weeks. And the Duneland is a great 5A league. Problem is Crown Point is one of the better, 6A teams in the state. So Crown Point got that win. They pitched a shutout. I think it was 21-0. If I've got that score memorized, I've got Pike coming up Friday night, so I'll have that score committed to memory over the course of the next couple of days if that's not the case. I would still put Crown Point probably 5th or 6th. I do think there is a line of separation between the teams that see each other regularly in the Indianapolis area, either in the HCC, the MIC, or the Independents in terms of Carmel or Center Grove, versus a really good 6A team from Fort Wayne, versus Crown Point, versus Penn, whatever the case may be. But again, I would give you the same geography statement I gave you about Center Grove. Rankings are nice. Now let's look at whom you match up with. And the way I feel about Center Grove being a certainty to be in the regional or semi-state, I'd probably say the exact same thing about Crown Point. So for Coach Buzea's team, it really is about, all right, I have to make sure my team is playing its best football by the time you get to the weekend before Thanksgiving. Because in theory, that's when you're going to see Carmel or Westfield or Fishers or somebody along those lines. Right now, that would be Carmel. And so they did exactly what Carroll did in playing Center Grove, what Homestead did in playing Carmel the last couple of years, even though they were down, what Homestead did in terms of playing Westfield in week number 1. Take those 2 non-conference weeks and find the best opponent you can. It's the joy of the way Indiana works with everybody in the tournament, with people not being seeded. It frankly doesn't matter what your record is. If you get beat badly in week 1 or week 2, so what? Now you know what the bar is set by the time you get to the postseason, which for the 5A and 6A guys doesn't begin until Halloween.
We got to turn to the Indianapolis Colts, and I will say, and I told you this already, but you did a fantastic job with coverage.
Thank you.
Great hearing you on the call. A couple of big stories out of the Colts leading into this. One is the quarterback, Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson. Your initial thoughts over that decision and what in your mind it came down to?
So I was a little surprised just because all I could base it on was what I saw in camp and in terms of practices. And in terms of practices, I did not think there was that big of a difference. But now that, I've kind of had a couple of weeks to marinate on this, I think it came down to just feeling that they could max out the potential of this group more so with Jones and knowing the pieces they have put around him. And the common line that kind of a lot of us have said about Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson all off season long, the ceiling is clearly higher with Anthony Richardson. The floor is clearly higher with Daniel Jones. And we've talked about this the last couple of years, and not the first team to talk about it, where you almost go, hey, listen, you don't need Pro Bowl level play at quarterback. You need average play at quarterback, because now the team has been built to the point of you feel good about the investments on defense. You like the wide receiver room. You address the obvious glaring need at tight end with Tyler Warren. Clearly, Jonathan Taylor is one of the 3 or 4 best running backs in terms of the National Football League. So if the quarterback play is just average or above average, then you're going to be okay. And I am aware of the fact that Daniel Jones is 24, 44, and 1. Believe me, I got those numbers printed into my brain in terms of a starting quarterback. But I also know he won a playoff game and led a team to the playoffs 3 years ago. So it's there. I can also tell you this. The fact that he was elected a team captain, because that was announced last week, kind of tells you that the guys in the locker room have bought into him as well. Now, the guys in the locker room really like Anthony Richardson and speak very highly of him. But when the new guy that wins the quarterback job is not named by the coach, but by a player vote, is named as one of the team captains, and basically the other 4 team captains are guys that have been here forever. It's DeForest Buckner, it's Quentin Nelson, it's Zaire Franklin, it's Kenny Moore. It kind of tells you, hey, there's something here. So, again, somewhat surprised knowing that the first couple of years, in case of a tie, so to speak, it went to Anthony Richardson. I do think Anthony Richardson was a better quarterback in training camp than I had seen in the previous 2 years. But the Colts are at a moment, and it's not just CYA mode for coach and general manager, but kind of how this roster is constructed. They need to win now, or if not, they're at a reset point. And if you want to, and the guy that they feel gives them the best chance to win now is Daniel Jones.
How did the coaching staff, and I would, their responsibility, keep this from being anything that was divisive within the locker room? That had guys starting to pick who their favorite was to be the starter. Did it seem like a decision was made and everybody was immediately on board and unified?
Everybody seemingly handled it very well. I'm not sure if there was PR training before or they correctly, kind of had the temperature of the locker room. And to be fair, like during training camp, we don't have access to the locker room. Guys are brought to a specific area. Training camp officially ended after the Packers game on the 16th. The decision was made on Tuesday, the 19th, or at least announced at that point. Locker room was open that week and the next week, and guys did a great job of towing the company line. And again, I will cite the example of Daniel Jones being voted a team captain. Again, that's not coach nominated. That is a player decision, and the most vote getters get it. So clearly the guys in the locker room have bought into Daniel Jones. Frankly, we all have sources that do this. I was getting feedback from players through kind of outside sources from the Colts that guys were impressed with Daniel Jones on the first day of off-season workouts in April. So in other words, that groundwork had been laid for 4 months until they got to that point. So I really don't think it's a divisive issue in the locker room. And part of it is, again, the guys like Anthony Richardson. He is a well-liked figure in that locker room. But a lot of people are going to be free agents this year or next. And they know if it's going to work here, it has to work now. So I think the way that Shane Steichen felt about the situation is the way guys in the locker room felt about the situation too.
Cuts came next, and the Colts got it down to a 53-man roster. And I guess the name that everybody immediately gravitated towards was Juju Brents as one of the big surprises. Is that the way you saw it, that was the biggest surprise among the Colts cuts?
Sure. I mean, and to be honest with you, when you have a quarterback battle, it kind of blots out the sun for everything else. But in all honesty, you felt pretty good about, you kind of knew who the Colts wide receivers were going to be going into training camp. You kind of knew who the Colts tight ends, for example, Jelani Woods, I thought looked really good, but there were 4 guys ahead of him. You kind of knew how that was going to play out. There's going to be some discussion about 3 running backs or 4, but Khalil Herbert got hurt and never really had a chance to kind of showcase his skills after week 1, so they carried 3. In other words, there was really only one other starting position battle, and it was the starting linebacker opposite Zaire Franklin. Other cuts happened because of injuries at corner and safety. Don't forget, the Colts had 2 guys they drafted, one on day 2 and one on day 3. They really liked that are both already out for the season. Justin Wally had kind of won a starting quarterback or cornerback job already before camp started as the slot corner. They were going to bump Kenny Moore outside. That he gets hurt against the Ravens in the joint practice on August 5th, and his season is over with. They loved Hunter Wohler in terms of the safety / linebacker out of Wisconsin. He was going to kind of play a dual role. He suffers a Liz Frank foot injury. He's done as of August the 16th. So that kind of opened up, some moves, and felt the Colts had to make some moves. In terms of Juju, so much has been made about Anthony Richardson, who played 15 games in 2 years. Juju had played 11. He played in 9 games his first year, played in 2 games his second year. So there's the greatest ability is availability. Then there's also the clear thumbprint that Lou Anarumo has on the defense. And it wasn't just Juju. That was a guy that saw decent playing time the last couple of years that was jettisoned. Sam Womack was a waiver wire pickup who kind of became an every Sunday starter last year, and he got cut. Chris Lamons wasn't with the team during the offseason program, got signed early in training camp. He played very well, and he got cut too. So how this team is going to play defensively is very different, and that's a good thing, than how they had played under Gus Bradley, and then before that, even with Matt Eberflus. So they feel they need corners a little quicker, corners that can get up and play a little more press man coverage, because that is what this team is going to do. So it was a mixture of injury and style of play that did indeed make Juju the biggest name that was a casualty of the roster 6 days ago.
I'm going to say something I couldn't have ever imagined myself saying over the last 3 or 4 years. Is the strongest position group on this Colts roster now the defensive backs unit?
It might be. When you bring in Cam Bynum, when you bring in Mooney Ward, if there is any quality football left in Xavier Howard, I mean, my goodness, the man had a 10-interception season in 2020. He's played 100 games, but did not play at all last year. Kind of stayed in shape to work out for teams, but never found the fit. And again, Lou Anarumo coached him his first 2 years in the league, so that's kind of that experience factor there. It can be. Brad, I would say the other direction you'd go with this is the deepest group might be the wide receiver room, because they return basically their top 6 from last year. And so I would say that would be part and parcel. But yes, when you invest the money that they did at safety and cornerback, and you still have a guy like Kenny Moore, and you have a guy like Nick Cross that went from basically, being a special teams player in year 1 and year 2 to being top 10 in the league in tackles a season ago in his 3rd year. Yeah, there's some strength there. And so again, it's part of why I think the Daniel Jones moves was made. The Colts feel really good about almost all of their roster because they've kind of invested around the quarterback position. And so they made the move at quarterback knowing that they feel that the other 21 starting spots are pretty well solidified.
We've seen over the last couple of years a slow transition in the offensive line. Like each year, talking about a different guy or a couple of guys. What do you think about? And the Colts have always been one of those top offensive line groups in the National Football League. Are they still up there? And if they've slipped, where have they slipped to? How good is this offensive line unit?
You don't question left tackle or left guard. You just sign Ryman to a 4-year extension early in camp. Quentin Nelson's an all-pro. You let Ryan Kelly go, after 9 years with the team. Right guard was a revolving door because Will Fries was really good. Then Will Fries got hurt. Now he's playing with the Minnesota Vikings, just like Ryan Kelly. It's fair to question Braden Smith because when he played last year, he was great, but, dealt with anxiety issues and walked away from the team for the last 6 weeks of the season. He is back. But you question the right side. This was almost kind of the Bill Polian blueprint. where you draft a guy, he's a backup for a year, then hey, you're starting, and that's exactly what happened. Gonzalez was drafted maybe to be the right tackle replacement for Braden Smith. They're going to try him at right guard. It's the reason why he actually played in the third preseason game and other starters didn't. He actually played in all three games and played at least a quarter in all three games because his experience is at tackle. And athletically, maybe he's better to be a right guard, but that's where he's going to be. That's your third-round pick from last year. Tanner Bortolini was your fourth-round pick from last year, but you drafted him to be, Ryan Kelly's replacement. So, again, the process is a good one. But now let's see this in action. Let's see if Gonzalez, who played about half the games last year, and Bortolini, who got a handful of games last year as a backup, again, the proof will be in the pudding starting on Sunday.
Hey, it's the opening game. I don't know if anybody has told the Colts it's the first game. We should tell them it's the third game. That
Right.
Two of those games they already played counted because they're not very good in openers.
No, you got to go back to 2013, and maybe the most damning stat I can give you is the starting quarterback in that game for the Oakland, not Las Vegas Raiders, was Terrell Pryor. That's how long it has been since the Colts won a season opener. Or you can look at it this way. This is my 14th year of being a part of the Colts radio network. That game took place in my second year as a part of being the Colts radio network, just to kind of give you an idea. So it's been a minute. And yes, I think this group is well aware that a better start would certainly be nice. And they play 4 of their first 6 games at home. Now, the first 2 games they get are against teams that, ironically, they were kind of battling for the last playoff spot last year. It was Miami and Denver who were kind of the swing games, and they won one and they didn't win the other. And it was the Denver game that unofficially did them in. But I would also say this, the back half of the schedule I think is tougher. But the other real quirk of this schedule, Brett, this year for the Colts is the fact that they don't see Jacksonville or Houston until Thanksgiving. They'll play Tennessee twice, who's obviously rebuilding, first couple of months of the season. Their next division game isn't until Houston at home on November the 30th. In other words, if the Colts can get to Thanksgiving at 500 or better, then their season will be laid out in front of them as to what they can accomplish over the last 6 weeks of the year.
Looking forward to it getting started Sunday. And what's you're just working the post game?
Correct. So post game during the season, if you're at Lucas Oil, you'll hear me doing the red zone highlights on Sunday. And as compared to the last couple of years where we have been like the factory team, it's been like a shift, 1 o'clock every Sunday. Because of the fact that we play both the AFC and NFC West this year, a lot more 4 o'clock games, and seemingly something very rare, a Monday night home football game for the Indianapolis Colts. Not to mention a trip to Germany in the middle of November. And before you ask, I'm staying here in Indiana. I do not get to make the trip to Berlin.
Well, we always enjoy you being here and being part of the Colts broadcast. Always entertaining to listen to. And thanks so much for jumping on. Looking forward to talking to you again many times, Greg.
Anytime, buddy. Take care.
Yep, that is Greg Rakestraw joining us, and somehow I've got to figure out how to get rid of him. So, it's easy to get him. It's sometimes hard to get. There we go. Hard to get rid of him. Who wants to get rid of him? I mean, I could talk to Rakestraw for a couple of hours, nonstop. I mean, really could. The guy's in-depth knowledge, unbelievable. Just so appreciative of him taking time to join us. And speaking of someone taking time to join us, we got to keep, because there's so much to talk about. And we talked a little bit with Greg Rakestraw about some of the Indianapolis high school teams. But let's talk about what's happening right here in the 260. There's the guy that knows everything happening in the 260 from Parkview Sports Medicine. It is Eric Dutkiewicz.
Good afternoon, Brett. Good to be with you on the video version of the Sports Rush for the first time. It's been a while, but I like the new digs. It's coming along with some of the graphics works, and it looks good. Sounds good too.
I apparently have been having some audio issues, so I apologize. I don't know why, but the problem is when you're doing a live broadcast and you're the producer for yourself.
Oh yeah.
It's a little tough to troubleshoot. So this is take 2 of our video today. We had to actually stop and start over. So I really appreciate everybody. And everybody that's with us right now, make sure if you're not already that you get hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything. There's not any kind of commitment. It's just a nice way of saying, "Hey, I'll give these guys my support." Just click the subscribe button. Also, like the video. You can comment. I've got the comments open, and I'm trying to track if I'm actually seeing them in real time. When I scroll, it seems like I find other messages. But these are always appreciate you in, and of course Ryan and Rick. Got anything like that on the comments? For some reason it's not scrolling for me. So I got to remember to kind of go old manual scroll. But
Yeah.
I'll try to keep
Well,
up.
I did see it in the YouTube app earlier that the comments were coming in. So good to hear from some of the people that I'm familiar with, and great to be on and have them listening and watching as well. So
All right, let's talk high school football. Big one from Friday night. Now we had one on where we were at, but the game that I think most local folks are keeping an eye on because it involved two in our area matchup between Snowball and Snyder. And this was all night. I watched the highlights, and I can tell you what I saw. East Noble was bigger, stronger, tougher, played better. I mean, everything he weighted toward the Knights. The score reflected that 29-7 East Noble over Snyder.
yeah, I mean, realistically, when you look at it, East Noble Snyder, that game there, East Noble took it to Snyder all night long, and really on the ground game. I mean, and that's what it came down to. Snyder just unable to stop the run for East Noble. East Noble racked up over 300 yards of offense on the ground, rushing, and three different rushing touchdowns from three different players with Ian Ramey, Austin Phillips, and Lucas Neiman. And so, it was just uncharacteristic, I guess you could say, to a degree, because it's one of those things where even if it's a down year for Snyder with graduation on the defensive side of things in particular, it was a manhandling of sorts that East Noble gave the Panthers. But East Noble, I think, is as advertised coming off of the state finals run a year ago. They come up short in the title game, but they lose quite a bit to graduation. But they have so much that has come back that it's been one of those systems of development where guys that are juniors that become seniors and sophomores, juniors, by the time they're getting their chance, they're ready to go. You think of somebody like Alex Scott, who was primarily defensive back a year ago, is now playing both ways. Even Riley Biddle himself started as the safety and has evolved into the quarterback position and doing great at both. So a lot of two-way dynamic players on that East Noble team, but realistically, East Noble, really good team 2 weeks in a row, and they get that big victory at home on Friday night.
So before the season started, I had the big reveal talking about Austin Phillips and how he was going to burst on the scene as a freshman that nobody saw coming. And then I looked at the stats from week one. I don't think he even played. And I thought, great. I spent my offseason building up a player who's not even cracked the two deep. But he got on the field on Friday, unfortunately, due to Ian Ramey's injury. But he got a chance to get on the field, and he did not disappoint. For a freshman, that kid's going to be a stud.
Yeah, we saw him at the PSM 7-on-7 up at Columbia City back in June. Boy, summer's flown by. June was when we had that, and some of the other members of the media and I were standing kind of out there and getting some highlights and watching what was going on. And who is that kid? Because we didn't recognize him, hadn't seen him really before, but he was a big kid. And we talked to him after the game, and he's a freshman. And lo and behold, as an 8th grader, he was the shot put national champion, I believe, in shot put, one of the throwing events at the AAU Nationals for his age range. Quiet kid, never really done an interview before. That will come, I think, through the process of maturation too. But the real deal, and he's going to be something big, and he's got a great system that he's part of at East Noble to develop and to become a primetime guy in the future.
All right, I'm going to make the bold statement because everybody's right now hyped on Northrop and Northside, and I'm going to say two pretenders. Pretenders. They got to prove something to me before I can classify them as a contender. How legit? They're both 2-0, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, "That should be your game of the week." I said, give them a couple of weeks. We'll see where
Yeah.
they're at.
I
They
think
play
that
each
one
other Friday.
Yeah, I mean, for both of these two teams, I think what it is right now, both of them sitting at 2-0, they have a lot of playmakers on the field. There's a lot of things that we haven't seen from either of these teams in a long time, and it may be another decade or so that we see something like this. And I think rightfully so that it's drawing attention, especially Fort Wayne Community Schools, Northrop, one of the biggest schools in our area, but I think it's part of the way the schedule is too, because ultimately, yes, 6 of the 10 teams in the SAC are 0-2 heading into conference play. But the competition that you play in outside of the conference is part of that too. What Carroll has played, what Dwenger has played. So that's not all surprising to a degree to see those teams sitting at 0-2. I
Dwinger's
think it is
1-1. Give them
surprising
their
to
win.
see.
Come on,
Pardon?
dude. You're gonna have the Dwenger fans all ticked off. They're 1-1.
1-1.
They won Friday night against.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
But I mean, I'm
I don't
talking
want them all,
the only two
emailing my
undefeated
boss because
teams.
I'm the boss and I don't want to get those emails.
No, I get it. But that's what I mean is they've also played harder opponents. Now, to that, you also want these teams in the middle and the bottom of the SAC, I think, playing competition that is comparable to them. So, like Northrop and New Haven, maybe not the greatest game in the world, but also, too, like for both of those teams, it's probably better than playing some of the Indianapolis schools. And that's my point too. So ultimately they're sitting at 2-0. Conference play hasn't started. I don't think either of these teams wins SAC, but also at the same time, they have a lot of confidence going into this. And I think from a city perspective, it's a marquee game that we'll have to see. But also there's, Lewis and Snyder playing for the first time in a couple years too. That used to start out the season every year and was an old time classic. And now, we haven't seen that in a couple years. So it's exciting to see some of those games back on the schedule as well with the new conference alignment. But yeah, I don't think Northrop and Northside will be there in the end, particularly Northrop being in the big school division, A division. But I think Northside has a better shot. But ultimately, after this week, and this is the first time since 2006, both of these two teams have been 2-0 at the same time. So there is a little bit excitement and buzz in the air.
I think one thing you've got to do if you're an SAC football fan is say there was a 2-game season that just got played.
Correct.
Everybody had a chance to schedule what kind of season they wanted. Did they want marquee names and big-time matchups and challenges and tests? Or did they want a couple of opponents that they thought they might be able to beat, give them confidence going into their next season? This is now. So to me, everybody is 0-0, and I kind of reevaluate everybody now that they start matching up against fellow conference opponents. So the first test for those two schools is who actually can beat the other head-to-head, and we'll find out this Friday. We'll also find out, you mentioned it, Snyder and Lures, which one of these teams avoids going 0-3?
Yeah, that's been a long time since that's happened for a variety of reasons. I mean, first of all, they're so good. Second of all, they used to play each other to lead the season. So you never had 0-3 Snyder 0-2 Snyder, 0-2 Lures. You get that this year in the third year of the conference realignment. But also too, there again, the opponents that they play, I don't think we're terribly surprised necessarily that Lures came out of it 0-2. I think Snyder, they're again not that they couldn't be beaten. I think the 29-7, the scores themselves, the fact that Snyder defense has put up 33, given up 33 points a game and their offense is only scoring, I think it's like 12. I think that is, drawing a lot of attention to it too. So as they go through that SAC in the big division and the Carrolls and the Dwengers and the Homestead, what will that look like at season's end? Because if it's 33 points a game or something similar to that, as the season goes on, you're not going to win games in the SAC and have a shot to win SAC. Like I think the Panthers they're in that conversation. They have to be. Everybody is on that big side because it is a new season for everybody.
I'll tell you what concerns me with Snyder in this matchup that we got this Friday is that Snyder's given up 700 yards of rushing in 2 games.
Yeah.
And we saw Bishop Luers. Where's their strength? That big, huge offensive line.
Correct.
I think they're going to trust their sophomore running backs. I think they're going to trust that offensive line to physically wear out Snyder up front, try to bust some plays on the ground. I mean, this could be a challenge for Snyder because of the fact that Snyder is being challenged right now, stopping the run. They have got to figure that out.
And Luers has struggled so far on the offensive side of things, just 7 points in 2 weeks, 7 at Leo, shutout against Andrean on Friday night. But their defense only giving up 14 and 13 in those games, 27 total. So I think the defense is good. The offense is going to have to come along for Luers. They got a sophomore quarterback, sophomore running backs, sophomore wide receiver. So in another 2 years, we're looking at a really good Luers team that is going to be the talk of the town, kind of the way we talk about East Noble right now, but also too, week 3, those guys are getting, and I find those running backs to be a little bit smaller. That isn't to say they're not tough. That isn't to say they're not strong, but it's going to be, can Snyder stop that run? Because I think that really sets it up where Luers has to throw the ball, and I think Snyder can, if they can get it to that helps them as well.
Any other games jumping out at you for this Friday?
Well, looking at the schedule, I think in the SAC, after those 2 games, it's pretty much, business as usual. I think the ACAC game, South Adams and Bluffton, that's one, because especially now we're going to start seeing those dominoes fall with a 6-team conference. South Adams was ranked in the top 10 in 1A, Bluffton a top 10 team in 2A. I think really, Adams Central is the team to beat. They always are, but South Adams, Bluffton, and Heritage are always that second team that if they have a shot, one of those 3 teams has got to do it. And we start off by 2 of those teams playing each other in the Starfires and Tigers at Bluffton. So that one jumps off too. And I think DeKalb, New Haven, not for necessarily the New Haven case, but they played well against Northside a week ago. But DeKalb, new head coach Ryan Roberson, we saw them play well against Angola in a loss, and then they get the big win last Friday. Roberson was the defensive coordinator at East Noble, now taking over that DeKalb job. So I think there's a little bit of a refresh sense for DeKalb, and we'll see how that pans out. So those are 2 that I'm watching. Huntington North and East Noble, that should be a fun one too. Those 2 teams played at the regional and in the regular season a year ago.
And New Haven should be able to provide a pretty good scouting report for Northrop Northside coming up, because that's
common foes for those 2 teams. Northrop wins 41-0 over New Haven. Northside had to pull away late. They struggled that second half. It got nip and tuck there, able to pull it out. So there's the common foe. So maybe that shows some light on where both of those 2 teams in the SAC are.
All right, got to talk about your Purdue Boilermakers. They get a 31-0 win. What stood out for you in the Purdue game Saturday?
Well, I think the fast start for Purdue. I mean, this is, to go down the field in 3 plays and about 80 yards, 75, 80 yards, and, the throwing of the ball down the field. Purdue fans love that. They've loved that since 1997. There have been comparisons I've heard amongst Purdue fans and Purdue people who have been connected and played and coached in the program. The Joe Tiller-esque of Barry Odom, but, good start, 1 win. I think we should get those shirts that LSU had, the 1-0 shirts, just to start there. But Ball State, a lot to they're completely bare and trying to get things up. New coach, they fired their old coach there, Mike New, and starting over with a Purdue grad, class of 2000. They said on the broadcast, same year as Drew Brees, didn't play it there, but ultimately, I think for Purdue, still got to find that run game. Maccabee is back, and 82% of that team, or 82 players, I should say, they said, Tim Newton said on the pregame broadcast on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM, said 82 new players on that Purdue team. So Purdue fans didn't know who any of these guys were, but boy, they made an impression right away. But keeping that momentum up, you play an FCS squad in Southern Illinois, a ranked FCS squad. So that comes to West Lafayette. So it'll be tough in that regard. But one game at a time at this point, I think is the best way to look at it if you're Purdue and Purdue fans. And we'll take the 31-0 victory over my alma mater, by the way. Ball State is my school. So I'm a Purdue fan. That happened before I went to Ball State for school. So I was rooting for the Boilers, but hopefully Ball State can turn things around too.
Maybe this is a question for Tim Newton, but how do you count Ryan Brown? Is he among those 82?
That one.
Because he left and then he came back, but he never really played anywhere. What Ryan Brown is back. What did you think of his performance?
Really good. 300 yards through the air. He was he became that starter at the end of the season in that dismal, at the end of the Walters era, the short-lived one. He was the guy. You saw that he was probably the best quarterback, of course, in the NIL era and everything else. He left for North Carolina in the spring. Then they hired Bill Belichick, and he didn't win any of that smoke. So he came back to West Lafayette. And I don't know how that stands in the eligibility and things like that either. That's far beyond me, and I'd have to dig further into that. But ultimately, he looked great against not a very solid secondary for Ball State. But that's the good place to start. You have 82 new guys on the team, but Ryan Brown as your quarterback, Maccabee as your running back. That's the place to start. They got to get that running game going. They couldn't get it going last year. Another game, less than 100 yards of rushing, still get a 31-0 victory. You'd think they'd have more rushing yards than that. And especially in the Big Ten, you're going to have to be able to run the ball somewhat to help to win games. And that's going to be the test too. I mean, Ball State is not Penn State, and I think that's going to be where some of those, what are we going to see out of Purdue come conference season?
Dude, appreciate you jumping on. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. Look forward to Friday night. You will be part of the PSM Tailgate pregame show live at Bishop Lures this Friday night ahead of the Snyder Panthers and the Bishop Lures. Thanks, man.
Looking forward to it. See you out there at Lures. Happy Labor Day to everyone, and good to be back on here with you.
Thanks, dude. Eric Dutkiewicz joining us here on our online live edition of the Sports Rush. Once again, if you've got any comments, you can always leave a comment. We'll try to get that answered while we're doing the live show. Also, make sure you share the channel. Make sure you subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, click that button. What are you waiting on? We need your help. That's what it's about, doing this show solo. Adam Lundy, by the way, he's on vacation. That's why Adam Lundy is not here. He's gone this week, next week, enjoying sunshine down in Florida. But he will return and be part of our Sports Rush Week live show coming up in a couple of weeks. But also, I mentioned this earlier. I've got quite a bit of breakdown on IU and Purdue, my thoughts on a video that I posted yesterday. But now we've got to talk about Notre Dame. Notre Dame falls to Miami. The Irish start 0-1. I don't think they're in bad shape. Everybody looked at this as one of the toughest games they were going to have on their schedule, going to Miami. Know the history between these two programs. Know Miami with Carson Beck and all the money they paid for him. They were going to be pumped up for this game. And there were some things that I thought Notre Dame could have done better. The turnovers obviously hurt them with the fumble, and then the questionable pass by C.J. Carr. But, we saw Riley Leonard throw a couple of head-scratching interceptions too. And, so I'm not going to get all crazy on Notre Dame. I think it's still a really good football team. I think there's plenty of bright spots for Notre Dame to build upon. I think they'll be fine. Miami, I don't know that they're going to be a national championship contender. They could be a contender to make it into the college football playoff, and this win certainly helps them in that regard. But I thought C.J. Carr handled himself well. I think he had to get over some early nerves, jitters. but I think he'll be fine as the season progresses. He'll only get better. Notre Dame, though, does need to figure out how to get more out of the running game. I mean, they've got stud, top running backs, and they've got to be able to create holes and give them opportunities to break some plays. And Jeremiah Love never really had that opportunity. What was his longest run? 8 yards. He's got to be given better opportunities because he's gone in the open field. If you can get him to the open field, and Notre Dame wasn't able to get him past the second level, so got to be a little bit better in that offensive line. But I still think Notre Dame's a real good football team, despite an 0-1 record. I think Indiana also is a very good football team. I mean, Indiana was absolutely dominant over Old Dominion if you actually watch the play on the field. But Indiana couldn't punch it in when they got inside the 5-yard line. Came away a couple of times without points in those situations. And that's why Indiana had a game that was much closer than it probably should have been. If you watch the game and watch the matchups and the physical, athletic, talent superiority Indiana had over Old Dominion, this game should have been probably something in the 40s, something 7, maybe 14, if you give the quarterback both those long runs. But it should not have been a 13. It was not that close. And so I think Indiana will be okay. Again, when you talk about nerves or jitters, clearly Fernando Mendoza was not himself. He did not have some good throws in that game. Had some inaccurate throws. Passes that I think as he gets more comfortable, he will complete. But I don't feel bad about Indiana or Notre Dame. I think they're both really solid football teams that will both be in the running to be in the college football playoff. Notre Dame, they've got a little more pressure now. They've got one less loss as a margin of error to make it into the playoffs. But, for Indiana, these first 3 are just tune-ups to get ready for Illinois. And I mean, the very correctable mistakes that Indiana made. It wasn't like Indiana wasn't as good as we expected them to be. They were dominant in that game. The score just didn't reflect how dominant they really were. Once again, mentioned this last night, the Fever lost last night to the Valkyries. Never were really in this. Caitlin Clark still out of the lineup. Sophie Cunningham is, of course, out here. And then you've got Lexi Cole with 2 black eyes. I mean, just a wild year for the Indiana Fever. That will do it for us. We're going to be back a couple of times this week. One quick mention about the Tin Caps. They finished off their home slate yesterday, and they lost to Dayton. Dayton, unbelievable. This team was, I think, 12-31. 12-31, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe even worse than that. Might have been like 12-35 or something. Their record in the second half of the season, and they go on this win streak. And now all of a sudden, they're the best team in the Midwest League, and no one can explain why. But they are really good right now. They're coming through timely hits. They're getting shutdown innings from their pitching staff. They're consistently good on the mound. Not walking a lot of guys. They're just playing really solid baseball. And they've won 12. They've won actually 13 straight games. They'll go for the record all by themselves. 13 ties their all-time franchise mark. 13 straight wins. They'll go for 14 tomorrow night at home. So, and they've got a real shot because they play Lansing. And Lansing is tied with Fort Wayne for the bottom spot in the Midwest League Eastern here in the second half. Timcast, meanwhile, finish up their season up at West Michigan, and all can be heard through 1380 The Fan or on the stream at 13thefan.com. Appreciate you very much, every one of you that's tuned in, and make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you give us a thumbs up, and make sure you ring the bell to get alerts for our next broadcast. Still working out our finalized schedule. Got plenty to talk about next week. Indianapolis Colts. I think we'll try to time it so we can talk about the Colts. Got college basketball just around the corner and plenty of college football. So you found the right place. We'd like to have you stick with us through the football season. That does it for another week. Have a great first week of September, and always joining us here live with the Sports Rush.